So, welcome to Men in Balance. Today we have a subject very appropriate for the season, and that is forgiveness. And we're talking to Jack Brant Jr. Welcome, Jack. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, Jerry.
So, Jack has a very unique story to tell in that his father was murdered, and he eventually made contact with the murderer in prison and told him that he forgave him. So that's a major step in the area of forgiveness. So, Jack, if you don't mind, I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you tell your story, and then I'll ask you some questions. How about that?
Sure thing. Sounds great. I appreciate you having me on, Jerry. Um, in 1995, my mom and dad were having issues. I was 25 at the time, and my dad decided we were living in California at the time, and my dad had decided to go to Northern California and leave Southern California. And my mom decided that she wanted to stay in Southern California. Um, my dad had kept depositing paychecks, work checks, and stuff like that. My mom called up there randomly one day to see how he was doing and to see if he had been able to make a deposit with the check. And that's when life completely changed for the entire family. Um, it was later part of August, I want to say around August 22nd of 1995. Um, and the foreman said he never showed up. He never picked up his check. And we don't know where he's at. And that's where the story began. My dad was a workaholic. He really enjoyed work and he used it as an escape and so on and so forth. And it just didn't seem right for him not to show up at this job. And my mom had filed a missing persons report, and the police officer said, "Oh, we see this type of stuff all the time. Probably just got tired of doing the family thing and ran off and went somewhere else." And it just didn't sit right with me, as I knew my dad was motivated by work, he was motivated by money, and for him to pass up on those two things just did not sit right. And my dad had bought um, this van while he was up there, this customized van, with all the luxury, the bed in the back, and so on and so forth. And they started calling saying, "Hey, he hasn't made any payments on this van." And time went by and they hired a private investigator to start trying to find this van. The private investigator said that he would share information with my mom if my mom would share information with the private investigator. And he's actually the one that was responsible for putting everything together. My dad was presumed missing from late August, till right around December 8th, I think it was, of 1995 is when we finally got an answer. Um, Now, we were all in Southern California and this took place in Northern California, but apparently my dad's body had been found in October by a young couple walking their dogs in this called Motorcycle Mountain, where a lot of Hell's Angels and motorcycle groups used to go to party and stuff like that. And one day they were walking their dogs, and one of the dogs, a young puppy, is the one that actually found my dad. but he was considered John Doe until it got put together by the private investigator, because he had deteriorated so much being outside, and all the news media and stuff was focused on Northern California, excuse me, in Northern California, that we didn't see any of that news in Southern California, where they were trying to identify the body, and the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department was looking for information. But anyways, private investigator asked us to fax up my dad's dental records, and sure enough, I think it was like December 7th or 8th, December 7th that my mom had faxed those up, and December 8th, I was sitting in American history class at junior college, and my mom and brother were out there in the quad when we found out that, yes, there was a positive identification made. It was my dad. He had been shot 4 times point blank. And then as the story unraveled, we found out that it took place in the van, is where he was murdered. And the person that murdered my dad did so because he wanted to steal my dad's van and use it to pay his drug dealer for, I guess he had owed his drug dealer thousands of dollars. And he went on armed robbery sprees from California to Idaho. They finally caught him in Idaho, and he had confessed how he murdered a person in Northern California, and that he was breaking out of a maximum security prison, which he did do. He broke out of that maximum security prison, came back to California. California had wanted him to come back to California, but Idaho did not want to release him. And when he came back, by escaping the prison, he was held in California from then on, and he fell under a 3 strikes rule, and he has to serve a 52-year sentence. Usually they let people off for good behavior and only have to serve about 50% of the time. But because he injured a deputy in Idaho when he broke out and escaped, he has to serve 75% of the time. So he ended up getting he has to serve 37 years. And I want to say he was like 35 when he did all this. And so we figured at 72 or that, when he was would be eligible for parole, that he probably wouldn't be able to get into too much trouble. So, but I had so much anger and all the other emotions that go along with grief. And I really had to come to terms and work through things and actually grieve. And the grief process gets put on hold anytime you're dealing with legal issues in the court system and the DA. And it just kind of, how do I say it? Just kind of takes you out of the ability to just grieve like a normal death might allow you to grieve. and it postpones it. But I had a lot of anger, and as time and healing went by, I really felt like God was saying to me that I needed to forgive him. And I would say it took about a solid 5 or 6 years before I could forgive him. But it wasn't finished at that point. It and it wasn't like I just said, "Oh, I forgive you. It's done and over with now." It was really having to wrestle with those feelings or entitlement or uh, the injustice of things, and really just letting it all go and not trying to cling on to those rights, and actually forgiving him. It was a process, and every time it kept creeping up and creeping up, I had to work at letting it go. And I remember going to this grief group one time, and they said there was an older gentleman there, said that you really got to watch your anger, because if you don't, that won't be the only life that is taken through that tragic set of events. And how he had gone through various marriages and businesses because of that anger and not being able to control his anger. And for some reason, his words just really sank into me throughout the years and stuff, to really watch that level of anger. And because anger in itself can be somewhat addictive and somewhat enticing. There's a certain level of power or control that I seem to want to have, that the anger was providing. And so I really had to watch it, and I really had to keep working through it. I had to go through some professional counseling, which I did with a Christian counselor. And I just, I did not want that person to infiltrate my life to the degree that he did. And so I really tried to keep tabs on it. And I remember going to this church in California, and they were starting a prison ministry, and the associate pastor had asked me if I'd be willing to share my testimony there. And I agreed to do so. And I was speaking about Christ's forgiveness. And I remember the chaplain there at the prison asking me if I had forgiven the guy that murdered my dad. And I said, yes. He goes, well, have you ever told him that? And I was like, no, I have not ever extended that to him. And, but I started thinking about it and praying about it. And I really felt like God wanted me to, and to kind of release that. So I was in seminary at the time, and I started writing the letter. And it was a real challenge, because I wanted to speak truthfully, but I also needed to extend grace in that letter. And I didn't know who I was addressing as I wrote that letter. Here was the man that took my dad's life. Um, but yet I, I felt like God wanted me to tell him I forgave him, even though he never sought my forgiveness. And so I did. I wrote a letter. It's actually in the book. And he wrote me back, and then I wrote to him, and he wrote me back. And at that point, I didn't feel the need to keep going with it. But this this book that I wrote focuses on that forgiveness aspect and reaching out to him and a lot of the grief associated, along with the murder and kind of the mysteries surrounding things. And um, Jack Murray Jackson is the one that edited the book for me and made it a little more a more cohesive story.
So just to back up a minute, the murder took place in 1995, and you wrote this first letter to the inmate in 2011. Is that right?
Yes.
So you had 6 years there of dealing with your grief and sometimes not dealing with it so well. Is that correct?
The murder took place in 95, and then actually what would the was that 15 years later before the letter actually went to the inmate. Yes.
Hmm. So what was the content of the response that he sent back to you? I mean, what did he say?
He said that he could tell by my name on the envelope or letter that he knew exactly right off the bat who it was, and he assured me that he read it all the way through. He sent the letter to his family members, and he was quite enthralled that I had reached out to him like that.
Did you
He
get
also
any apology at all?
that I I'm not trying to dance around or that. It just seems like he refers to that night more of a tragedy than, or that day or night, whenever it happened. But he refers to it more of a tragedy versus a personal accountability, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah. So you went through a period of grief there and anger and as you said, the dealing with the authorities does sort of put the grief process on hold, but eventually you had to deal with that, and this influence from this other person led you to go ahead and write the letter. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Let's see here. That chaplain kind of sparked it, and then I really felt like it was something I ought to do, even though I kind of had a battle going on between doing it or not doing it, but I eventually came around and did it.
So talk a little bit about how bad that time was when you were wrestling with your own feelings and anger and stuff. I mean, was that well, first of all, I gather from what you said earlier that you didn't have a great relationship with your dad, but this sort of robs you of a chance to sort of resolve that, right?
Exactly. It's interesting because it seemed like my dad and I were at odds more times than not throughout life. Um, but I did have a total blessing given to me. It was the last day I ever saw my dad, actually, and he told me how proud he was of me and how much he respected me and how much he truly loved me. My dad had a pretty horrendous childhood himself, and so I think that he battled not knowing how to be a good dad uh, to me. My brother was better. I have a younger brother that was much better at standing up to my dad throughout the years than I was. But yeah, we had a rocky relationship, and but that last day I got to see him and talk with him and stuff was just an absolute blessing that I just treasured and held in my heart. Even to this day, um, it still means so much to me. Um, yeah,
So
but oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Um, on the other aspect too is, yeah, I felt completely robbed of having. I mean, even if it was just a possibility, just the fact of having that possibility of having a good relationship with him somewhere down the road in this life, um, to have that taken away by unnatural means, uh, did not sit well at all.
Yeah. So during some of this time, you were taking classes in seminary, is that correct?
Yes,
And
yeah.
so how did your work there affect your thinking about forgiveness, or did you see a connection there?
I don't think my mind's ever been as sharp since, as it was during those days in seminary, because you're reading the Bible so much and dealing with those subjects of pertaining to the Bible, that my mind was extremely clear at that point, and the references, the stories, and so on and so forth really absolutely affected I, that letter. I don't know that I could write that letter again, to be honest with you. I mean, I just it seemed like things were very sharp in my mind at that period of time.
So your wife has said that you're going through the process of writing the letter and writing the book helped you get rid of a lot of your anger and grief and so forth, and that it's really made you a better person. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think I know what you're referring to, and I think I think having written the book did help. I think that article was a little slated, like that was his angle. That particular reporter, I think he wanted to go with that anger aspect. I mean, I I'm not gonna lie, anger is a tough one for me. I I that's probably the emotion that is very easy for me to get to.
Hmm. Yeah. S- Well, I want to thank you for your braveness in talking about this and your willingness to talk about it with us. We appreciate that you're doing that. The book is called Horrendous Healing, and it's by Covenant Press. And is it available on Amazon yet or not?
It is. I happen to have a copy here.
Yeah.
It's available at excuse me, Amazon. Barnes and Noble and Books A Million's website in paperback right now. The publisher is getting ready to do their release, I believe, in January, and then they'll have the electronic version as well as a more formal rollout.
Yeah. Okay. Jack Brant Jr., author of Horrendous Healing. Thank you so much for being with us, and appreciate your willingness to talk about this issue, which is very important to men, and something men wrestle with a lot, and especially the forgiveness aspect. And so that becomes very important. I'm Jerry Hancock for Men in Balance. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much.